In our December 21st meeting, Jeff and Vanessa gave us all a really nice presentation on the student count projections. We did it live. I don't think we had a handout. We probably should get a copy of that, at least attach it to the meeting notes. Tom, maybe you can do that. I don't think there's anything in there that we would hesitate putting into the record or on the front porch.
No, because it's all based on the school district percentages.
Okay. Jeff, I know I didn't ask you, I didn't give you any heads up on this, but if you're in a position to do this, could you summarize maybe the main points that you made last time, or maybe Vanessa, you could jump in and help with that?
Sure, Vanessa, if it's easier for you, that's fine. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you're good.
Loud and clear.
Okay, so I guess the main points in the presentation last week, or on the 21st, I should say, were, first of all, went through the assumptions that we had that got us to a need for, plus or minus 1,000 extra students at the existing K-8 facility. The next thing was to take a look at, sort of what are the numbers driving that, and then to distill a couple of myths within it. So a couple of big things I would say are key findings there. One being that the existing 5,000 plus residences in Celebration actually have much lower ratios than those used by the school board for forecasting. So when we went to each of the expansion models, like we considered Island Village and then to a full build out, it inflated the existing population as well. So that added, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 225 to 240 students. I'm going from memory here, sorry. More than what would have been required. The second main thing in there was the fact that in our model that we were using to come up with the 1,000 students, or that had been suggested to us for the 1,000 students, it also added a gross up factor for the 80-20 rule. Well, it's very clear from the documents, and I put that in the presentation, that the 80-20 rule applies to the whole community, in terms of both the high school and Celebration School, the K-8. Because we have so much excess capacity for non-resident students, both now and in the foreseeable future at the high school, we meet our 80-20 requirement and then some. So the need to gross up was inherently flawed. So that added probably another 450 students into the equation. And then on top of that, we also have, and Vanessa, maybe you can share a little bit on this, because I'm going from memory here a little bit, the ability to do some renovations at the existing K-8 school to create more seats with the existing footprint.
Building 11 still is the last one that hasn't been renovated yet. And that, I believe, when I was talking to Mr. Balone, it was a mirror to what was done this past summer, and that was 88 seats. So, does that sound about right?
We take those numbers plus the overstated numbers, and what we find is, the gap really is, a couple hundred students. So, pardon me. The other thing is, in the agreement between PCC and the board, the school board, it's very clear from the onset that the K-8 school was originally designed to be a K-7, and the high school was always to have been an 8-12. There's a provision in there that if we didn't occupy, the entire school in K-7 and there was excess capacity with community consultation, the board could use, the additional seats to do up to a grade 8 at the existing school. So, those factors combined really, show that, we really have very little need for much additional build to deal with Island. In fact, we don't have any need for additional build to deal with Island Village with the existing 2 schools. And even for full build out, it's a nominal amount. Probably in an ideal scenario, just north of 200 seats.
So
Can I move you, Tom?
That's great.
That's great, Jeff. And that last point he made was, we had considerable discussion in our last meeting about that think the town was under the impression that we had this enormous capacity problem. And in some ways, we collectively, we and the county do, but we as Celebration, just as Celebration lands on, do not, according to these numbers. And I wanted to talk about it again tonight because some of you weren't here and some of our voting members weren't here, to just make sure that we are all wrapping our heads around that, or if that's not correct, that we have a discussion about that.
Did you want to send this around? Yeah.
Well, we can just send it.
Okay, just send.
Because
Yeah,
we
that
all
was in,
have it.
that was in the summary.
It was in the
It was
summary, okay.
It was attached to the minutes.
In the minutes.
Minutes, yeah.
And
Right,
maybe we get this over to Tom and
Yeah.
Tom.
Did everybody from the school district or Tom, did you guys get all that, or not?
Sorry?
Did you get that information on the recap or not?
That was in the enclosure.
So Jay Wheeler, who was here last time, pointed out, he didn't dispute the numbers at all. In fact, he basically said that the numbers were spot on. I think that's a quote. But he said that he pointed out what I just said, that is a parochial view from Celebration's perspective only, that there's not a capacity problem, that we could solve this with a small incremental addition to the K through 8, respread the grades, and be done with it. And that was not going to solve any of the county's bigger problem. But he didn't disagree with the numbers.
I just emailed the presentation from last week for Tom, Rhonda, and Todd.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
No problem.
We're not, Celebration Company isn't the final arbiter of the numbers, but I would caution that the generation that you're seeing today is not necessarily potential student generation that you could see or you have seen in the past. So building for what is, building for student capacity based on today you may end up being short in the future. So the numbers that the school district use for planning purposes are based on historic averages, on however long but that's why we thought that there was a bigger demand created by both Island Village and the build-out.
Yeah.
than what is shown in that spreadsheet.
Are you talking about the multipliers?
Yeah, the student generation rate.
Okay, so Jeff gave the appropriate caveats that the factors or the multipliers or whatever you want to call them that have been historically accurate might not be in the future, but just order of magnitude, these numbers seem correct. And the reason I want to talk about it again is it does, this conclusion absolutely colors our recommendations or the straw poll that we took at the conclusion of last week's meeting. And a binding, this directional, but this idea that there is a ninth option that we also talked about, that probably has more traction than any of the other options right now, is basically an incremental addition to the K through 8 only. Because of, primarily because of these numbers that Vanessa and Jeff brought to light for us.
Like, again, I just want to reiterate, those were based on the percentages that were provided by the district too.
So to add one more thing to that, in terms of it being an incremental upgrade, there'd be incremental upgrade only for Celebration. We did discuss additional possibilities outside Celebration to address the student seats that are needed in the county. So there was a couple.
Yeah, and we can.
So I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that. 'Cause
Sure.
it wasn't just a
We'll go over
Celebration
what-
only thing.
what that
There was two parts
alternative
to it.
means.
Right.
So Vanessa, those numbers are based on
The percentages, the percentage ratios, and it was just done based on single-family homes too, not based upon the multifamily, because we obviously didn't have that breakdown.
But did that go back and calculate it based on the total 8,065, or did you use existing attendance and then add on Celebration?
It was existing attendance and added on.
That's where I'm saying I think there may be some risk there.
Sure.
To
It's
see
what Jeff was saying, the existing enrollment is slightly lower
Right.
than what we would expect, but for
Right.
planning purposes, we have to plan as if you were to generate your entire population.
Got it.
So there's where the risk is.
Okay.
Okay, but is the risk significant? I mean, I think what we're talking about now is, if I can paraphrase what number 9 is all about, is add the seats that are necessary at the K through 8. Make some improvements to the common facilities like the cafeteria and few of the other common areas. And if there's any money left over from the impact fee, to use that outside of Celebration as the county sees fit, but not to build 1,000 seats for, within Celebration, either the K through 8 or the high school or both. That we didn't feel that the Island Village impact fee needed to pay for all of that, if that's fair.
It'd be
And-
different if we were actually getting the impact fee for the full, for the full, 2,300 or whatever it is that we would be.
Right, plus some of that, I throw out that number 1,000 seats just as sort of representing the option number 1, the original proposal. Some of that 1,000 seats hasn't been funded yet by future impact fees. So why should the 12 point whatever have to fund seats that haven't been built yet, or seats for kids whose houses haven't been built and haven't had impact fees applied? So that's sort of, sorry, Tom, that's sort of where we were headed at the conclusion of last meeting that some of you missed, so.
And we didn't know, too, what the actual, we haven't even delved into costs, students, whether it be at Celebration or West Side, we haven't even delved into that yet. So we're not at that point. So when we say spend the money here or spend the money there, we haven't drilled into that yet.
No, I'm sorry, Lee, I know you wanted to get a word in.
Just, yeah,
Can you come up?
one clarification. Leah Carius, 1049 Nast Drive. It was my understanding when y'all presented the numbers, that when you had the big graph up there, you showed that our current numbers right now fall below the percentage.
That they're
But
expecting.
we still we didn't fall to what we have. We still use the higher percentage that y'all use to calculate, so we still use the highest calculating point that y'all used, even though Celebration has never matched that number as the buffer. Is that correct? That's what I
Yeah,
understood from Jeff's number.
What were you,
Right, one-
but you're shaking your head, no, what is it,
I think you used existing headcount
And then added.
The additional.
But that was the
Correct.
numbers, but with
Correct.
calculating future growth, we still use that full ratio number and not the lower one that we're actually at right now, correct? So we still,
That's right, Lee. The future growth is all based on that higher number that the board gave us for the, for their outlook, for their planning purposes. The point was that our existing population doesn't come up anywhere close to that. So that, that could be overstated, but I wouldn't want to be the one to guess that.
So that's where the variance that Todd was mentioning.
Correct.
Because they have to build around potential as opposed to action.
Well, one way to look at the numbers, though, is if everything continued as it's going now, and Island Village is built, we may not have any issue capacity-wise at all. If things are, if you build Island Village and things go according to the district, we have one magnitude of problem. And if we build the entire entitlement and things go according to your base projections, then we have a really big, kind of big gap. Really
Well,
big
what's the
gap.
difference between historical percentage and the actual percentage that the school board's looking for? What was the difference?
Substantial.
Jeff, do you remember what the percentage difference was? Did you hear what Brian's question was?
Can
Yeah.
you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The question was, what was the difference between what the current percentage that was supposed to be used versus what we are at currently? Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, so if memory serves me right, so I apologize when I'm driving, I don't have the numbers in front of me. The forecast number, I think, is 0.264
Right.
times the number of households. Our actual is, is 2.6. Ours is like 2.0 something. It ended up being overstated by, I think, 225, if I'm certainly right. Yeah, against that 5,000 households we have currently.
Right.
So,
We also, one thing I didn't mention, we also had factored in the rest of the build-out of Celebration Boulevard too.
yeah, so there might be tens or 100 at the most difference, depending on the multiplier. But the eye-opener of last week was, we don't need Celebration doesn't have to solve for 1,000 kids. We need to solve for a few hundred. The county still has their problem. But I think the perception of the voting members changed quite a bit based on these numbers that were presented.
Just based on my calculations, based on .20 versus .25, 300
That's what we
students
measured,
difference,
between 300 and 350.
just in existing Celebration.
Right, so if historically we were coming up to the generation numbers that we are potentially planning for, we would have that many more students than we have now. We would already be past capacity.
No additional.
Right.
And then also keep in mind, we fill today at the school.
I think there's 6 classrooms that are open right now.
Right, so there's a couple, you know, when we started looking at, you know,
Is that right? 6 classrooms?
88, there was a couple different pockets that started affecting the numbers.
So tell you what, let me, what I'm trying to do is just recap the critical
Sure.
items from last week that a lot of us missed. It's been suggested by Tom, and I was thinking about the same thing, that this week, or before our next meeting, if we could have a little bit of a workshop, Tom, with you and Rhonda and maybe Clyde, Todd, if you're available, to just go over the numbers. Maybe, hopefully Jeff will be back, maybe we get Vanessa there, and just make sure that we're all on the same page regarding the numbers, because understanding the numbers affects our recommendation.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're far off, but let's just make sure that we're all in agreement that the numbers are the numbers.
Right.
So we'll try and schedule that. Yeah, Leonard?
Just have 3 quick comments. One has to do, of course, with the statistics you're talking about. There's always variations in statistics, and you do with what you can the best way. The school board uses statistics based on their countywide experience, which basically has a demographic of a lot lower income than in Celebration. And that's why you're seeing the difference in the school board statistics countywide versus what's shown up in Celebration. And these same statistics have shown up in Celebration for the last 19 years here. We've never really exceeded the county numbers for the number of households we've had in here. If you just went with their straight figures as to what they would say we would need student station-wise for every student. And that went back for the initial expansion here and everything. No, I won't go into that. I pointed out to some people, actually, I pointed out to Mike Medici at that point how the numbers were running, and they still chose to build what I thought was an overbuild for Celebration at that time. Now, since they've developed some of these other areas, Artisan and all that, then it's changed. But at that point, it was still much of an overbuild. So another thing that's in this whole process that was brought up in another meeting is, again, the Celebration Company has its own set of problems, and right now it's trying to use 1,300 households worth of impact fees to solve a 2,200 household total problem. In other words, that's their final build out for the DRI, would be the 1,300 in Island Village, and then they'll wind up with 900 more, is that correct? More or less?
Roughly.
So they're trying to use that, which would, over time, that 900 would actually bring in another $10 million of impact fees, more or less. It's never been offered or brought up, because they're not even on the drawing board for that. It's way down the road. And, well, it could be next week, and if it is, maybe there's some prepaid DR, or prepaid impact fees that could be thrown back in here, drawn back out into the county if we've already solved the situation inside here, and, you know, be going towards another high school out on the west side here somewhere. And the very last, actually the last is a 2-point thing. One is the extra room that would still be available even after you moved 8th grade to the high school, would be the possibility of moving 7th grade to a high school. I know Rebecca knows a fair amount about that. And in Newsweek this last month, West Shore High School in Melbourne, whatever county that is, they chose one school from every state to have the best school, and they wound up being chosen as the best school, and it's a West Shore 7 to 12. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so another follow-up that you'll see in your email when you get back to your office was Cookie Kelly brought up. She had done a little research. She's not here. I don't see her. Florida Statute 163, and we don't have the subsection number. But we asked Larry Brown if he would follow up and just see if that applies here. And Tom, if you could just help us, just make sure that to close the loop on that. A fifth item from last week was just the creation of alternative number 9 up there. We left the previous meeting with 8. We came up with that number 9. It has a lot of attributes, positive attributes of the original Plan 1. But is basically a combination of number 1 and a realization that we don't, well, if the numbers are correct, and you just have a celebration lens on, then maybe there is just a manageable incremental addition to this campus that doesn't trip over this tipping point of being too big and unsafe and too much traffic and all those things. And if we can set up this workshop to understand the numbers, I think it'd be really worthwhile to sit down and roll up our sleeves and really dig into could we pull that off and what would it look like? And then cost estimating and everything that would follow.
I'm curious, really quick, just as a side, has any of the traffic study information come back preliminary yet or not?
We're expecting them within 2 weeks.
Okay.
They needed more information apparently from us over the winter break, and we weren't there, so we sent them the information today, so they said about 7 to 10 days.
Okay.
Isn't that point going to be discussed later?
They don't have the information yet, that's.
But I'd like to make a comment about what they've done so far, that's why.
I'll make sure it comes up, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. I just wanted to follow up and clarify a little bit more what Leonard was saying, because I think it's really the crux of the problem. My understanding is that with Island Village and some redo of the school, not really any new construction, we should be okay. We should have a buffer, we should be safe. If, however, we are looking at the additional complete build-out, we would then be looking at additional impact fees. And at that point, we might have to go a step further. Is it possible to build one additional wing at the school? Or, as Leonard suggested, move some of the grades? I just want to sort of get this straight.
Both of those things were on the table last week, and we've acknowledged both of them. Your first point about, not to put words in your mouth, but we don't want to just be right back here again.
Right.
You know, if you do another deal. So if we can, and we were scheming around this point on number 9, is if we could plan for the total build-out, but only build what's funded, as long as there's an expansion plan in place, and that's, hopefully we can work that out in this workshop, at least conceptually, about how to do that, so we just don't have to go through all this pain all over again.
Well, and I'm sure it's the county's desire to.
But
create a solid
to also
model.
be clear, what number 9, if I can just say it boldly, it does not solve the county's bigger problem. And if any of the board members or maybe the staff would like to say that out loud, number 9 does not do that.
And just simply adding students or squeezing them in at the K-8 right now needs some careful thought, because we do have facilities difficulties. And
Already.
if we don't comparably upgrade the facilities for incoming students, then we compromise the school that we have.
Absolutely. Right now, you're going to have issues, even with increasing a little bit more with lunches right now. I mean, I think we've all talked about the fact that we start at 10:30 and we end at 2. So if we add 88 more students or 150 more students or however many more students we're going to be adding, that's going to complicate the issue, so. So yes, we have enough capacity, we don't have the infrastructure. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can-
I'm
Vanessa,
sorry.
I-
Just
I
wait
had
one
that
second.
too,
Rhonda,
as an
just-
Facilities as well, not just deal with the, lunchroom or gym issues, but, possibly look at a track, those other things we talked about as well.
Okay. Rhonda, what were you going to say? We can hear
I do
you.
not believe there's enough capacity at the current school to absorb the rest of the boulevard and island villages. You'll fall short.
Okay. Do you know about how much you think will fall short?
It's a rough estimation, but the one thing nobody takes into consideration is the voter class size amendment.
Okay, the
So children
25.
do not show up in perfect 18s and 22s.
No, they don't.
So roughly across the district, what we see is every school loses 10% of their capacity to balance class size.
Okay.
So if your school's 1,500, right off the bat, you're gonna lose 150 seats, and nobody is taking that into consideration either.
Okay.
So far, all we're talking about is if everybody showed up at the perfect grade, the perfect number. So when you add that on top, I think we need to take that into consideration as well.
Okay, so you think that we should add an extra 10% on top of what we've been doing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I definitely don't believe right now, even coming in at a lower actual enrollment, I don't believe we'll break even to island villages inside of the current school.
Okay, thank you.
One of the sets of numbers, though, looked at making no major additions except maybe renovating Building 11, but moving grade 8
Right,
to the high
that's-
school.
yeah.
That would free up the grade 8 space for Island Village K through 7 students. That's, I think most of the options we talked about last week centered around, assumed moving grade 8 at some point.
Based
to
upon the
high
original
school.
contract agreement.
So
Right.
for those
Tom?
who weren't here last time, I thought it'd be helpful, Pat, to just, and Brian, just to let Tom describe what this number 9 option is.
Let me, and I'll do that, and then I also want to comment on the moving 7th through 8th. So, one of the things we looked at with the impact fees is we're trying to address, and it's very difficult, okay? We're trying to address capacity at Celebration, capacity outside Celebration, okay? Obviously, like we talked about, we don't know the numbers in terms of dollars, okay? But we're trying to go ahead, and here we adding Building 11, adding 150 seats of innovation. We're still talking about the numbers. We still have to go ahead and finalize that. We're looking for an incremental expansion for the build-out. So we talk about saying there's this much impact fees now, there's a possibility of impact fees later. How do we go ahead and do it? Is something built inside Celebration first, west side first? We don't really know. But we're again, trying to go ahead and balance that out. Transfer ed create a high school was brought up. Use some impact fees to renovate certain areas. Some of the things the school has mentioned has been the cafeteria and the media center. Possibility of building something in a much smaller scale, maybe on the K through 2, K through 3 area back there. So again, utilizing the same concept. We talk about the full expansion of having some sort of cafeteria where food is moved back and forth. We would still utilize one kitchen, but it'd be moved to a smaller cafeteria, so that people won't be eating so close to breakfast or so closer to release time. And this allows the Osceola County School Board to have a kind of a balance, all right? So, they can address some needs outside Celebration, and they can address needs inside Celebration. I think Tom said it best, this isn't something that's gonna go ahead and solve everything. There isn't a magic solution to solve everything. But it does give everything a little bit to go ahead and allow it to handle. Now, again, we still have to talk about how much it would cost, you know, whether there's either additional funding or long-term funding that can happen. You know, one of the things is that, talking about some of the other considerations, it was either gonna solve Celebration's issue, or it was gonna solve the county's issues, but it wasn't gonna really solve both. So we're trying to do the balance. And the only concern I have, and I think, Dan, when you mentioned doing 7th or 8th grade over the high school, my only concern when we keep talking about that is, you know, back in, geez, was it November? Yeah, I guess so. When they had the school board meetings, it didn't seem that the school board was really open to that. And so I just want to caution it, because if we keep bringing it up, we might be creating a little more of a little headbutting when that really wasn't considered there. Because one of the things they keep mentioning is, it's great, you know, 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, but we get no room for the current students at the high school to move anywhere, so we can't move them over. And we do keep bringing this up, so I'm just wondering, is that a good path to go down? So.
Well, it's an option, Tom. I think, you know, that transferring the 8th grade will be a lot less painful than transferring both.
Right.
But if it solves problems,
Mhm.
it needs to be up there for
Yeah,
consideration.
That's fine.
I just want to point out too, Tom, I'm not necessarily saying that I would agree with that, but I believe that the context was that was
That was in
Jeff
the
highlighted the agreement.
Yeah.
And he presented the numbers of what that would look like
Agreed.
to free up the space.
Agreed.
And that kind of decision would have to be taken with a really careful look at what our current 8th grade studies and looks like and moves into at the high school, would have to be done in close conjunction with an educational plan that was advantageous to these 8th grade students. We just don't want to just throw them out there and not have them on a path. We'd have to be looking at all kinds of programs that would help to integrate them. And build.
And as we talked about last week, and Sophia pointed out, you have to think about sports and after
Right.
school and all of those things. So there are pros and cons with all of them, including number 9. But again, a lot of you weren't here last time, so we wanted just to recap that. The last thing we did at our meeting last time was we took a straw poll of just the voting members. So Pat and Brian, you weren't here for this, but let me just give you a quick rundown of how this went. Number 1, the original plan. And we just kind of made this process up as we were going along. But we gave each of us 3 chips. So if you gotta put a chip down on 3 of these options, where are you gonna place them? So number 1 got 1 vote. Just number 2, which is just redistribute the grades from Celebration School to Celebration High School, got 2. Option 3, which was build a new middle school someplace in Celebration, and this is all in the meeting notes. Build a new middle school somewhere in Celebration, got 2. Option 4, build a charter school somewhere in Celebration, got 0. So what we decided, and this isn't, you know, carved in stone, but the ones that got 0, we really don't need to spend a lot of time on anymore, unless Brian or Pat, you want to advocate for one of these. So charter school is pretty much off the table. Number 5, build a parochial school or some kind of private school option, got 1. Build a K-8 in Island Village, also got 0. Build a K. There was another option, I don't even know if it's up there, that Jay Wheeler brought up to build a school in conjunction with Orange County. Didn't get a lot of conversation, but we took that up. He pulled it, that's right, thank you. And then number 9 got 5. So again, it's just directional, but this seemed to be, you know, kind of consensus building. Yeah, Tom.
You got 7 and then you got 9, was
Right.
that number 8? Was
8 came off the table. Jay
That
pulled
that
it
was the one that was the joint Osceola County,
Or
Osceola
Osceola Orange
Orange County
And they would
high
build a
school
joint
combo.
high school.
But didn't we talk about
using 851, building this building as an option, and taking some of the, whatever the money would be left over to possibly build, expand at other campuses to accommodate the growth outside.
Yeah, it never actually made it to the
No,
board.
it's right there, just not
Um,
circled.
I mean, I see it there.
Combination of one,
It just wasn't, no one drew an 8 and circled it, it's incognito.
True. So those are just lots of ideas that could.
But nobody,
could-
nobody
could
said,
still
nobody
apply.
put their chips on that one, I don't think, did they?
You know, I don't,
And,
I don't think I gave
think-
anybody a
But I
chance.
think also, if we did use the 851 building as a means of expanding this school and doing some renovations, that implicitly, to me, falls within the 9 option.
Could, yes.
But it also, didn't they say they had to do a lot because this wasn't up to code
Mhm.
Yeah,
currently,
they-
so, you know,
It was
it
built
wasn't
20
so
years ago,
simple.
yeah.
Yeah, nor
Well, they were
is it
building
our-
schools 20
Nor
years
is it
ago.
our building.
Willing to do this one
But the,
here.
all the, I'm sure the hurricane standards have probably changed since then, there's been, yeah, there's been a bunch of changes.
At one point, it was built to the
Right.
school standards,
Sure.
so
But then they
I mean, there'd
changed the
be some
standards.
modifications that would have to be done, but it
Right.
would be a whole lot cheaper than obviously constructing a whole new facility.
so was there any, I apologize
I
for
think
this,
somehow
was
that
there
got-
any debate or discussion around the voting? So I'm curious about the revotes for the K-5. Was there?
I
Yeah.
think a lot of that, as Tom said, as we were talking about it, it came down to if you had to put chips down, and you had to go ahead and say, I bet if you went ahead tonight at the end of this meeting, we said, hey, we wanted to go ahead and narrow that a little more, and didn't put a limit on how many, which one you could vote for, you could come up with a different number, you know? You could also say, well, we could have a, you know, if I had to do like, my preference is option 9. Okay, if I had 3 chips to put in, well, technically, maybe I'd put all my 3 chips on option 9, but that would be fair. So we just wanted to, you see what I'm saying? That's
Yeah,
where
no,
it kind of,
So we're not, it might sound silly, but I mean, we're not playing games. We're trying to keep the most positive aspects of any of these
Right.
alive as they might apply to 9, or they might apply. My third chip was for the K through 5. Wasn't my favorite, but
Yeah,
it
no,
was
and
my
I
third
understand.
favorite.
It is one of the more feasible options.
Yeah, yeah.
Tom, is it possible to get Pat and Brian's perspective on this too, since they didn't have an
Absolutely.
opportunity last week?
Well, I don't know about Brian, but I'm sitting here thinking, can't we put all 3 of our chips on 1? And I would like to put all 3 on 9. So,
I think we're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
How about you, Brian?
Well, I mean, not to play devil's advocate here, but it all comes down to the numbers. I mean, 9 might not be feasible at all. But if you were to combine 8, is not really up there, or 9, it'd really be 8, 9, and I still don't think 1's out of the picture if it's designed properly. Throwing it in the middle of the soccer field is completely crazy because there's enough space to fit it in other spots. But if done properly, you know, you could do that expansion too. So 1 is, to me, it's not off the table if it's designed correctly. The way it's quickly thrown on a sketch and thrown out there, I think it alarmed everyone of how it was placed.
well, I think it was placement, but also the 1,000 number, the number of 1,000.
not the 1,000, yeah.
That seemed to be get the most from the community going, wait a minute, 1,000 students and 700 from outside celebration, which means either busing or cars coming into the community. That was the,
And I
you know.
still think, even though on safety side, everyone's saying extra or whatever, I think ultimately, even though you do the study and everything goes to pass, there should be a way to design a way to drop off kids safely, because the way it's now, it's a free-for-all. Okay, I originally was in North Carolina where it actually was, you come through this door, you come through that door, you pick up from this door, and if you're in South Village, you don't come to this entrance, you come to the gym, okay, as opposed to driving all the way through around Founder's Park and do that crazy. I mean, there's a way of doing that safely and removing the chaos in front of Founder's Park. That's the biggest thing, that's the nightmare every single morning and afternoon.
But there's also just a total bottleneck on Celebration. I mean, I
So
tried
that's
to
a
get.
bottleneck because there's stop signs every corner.
Well, but there's also children and people picking up kids coming in that way. I mean, it took me 25 minutes to get from the Dina Place to down, I mean, what is that,
And
5
that's-
blocks?
And that's today.
That was today.
Imagine
Oh, yeah.
what-
But if you had everyone in South Village going to the gym, which goes to that parking lot, and back out to the kindergarten come through, that drop-off lane, and have walkers only go out Founders, you really wouldn't have a lot of car traffic around Founders Park. If you really look at this traffic study, so I'm curious to see what the traffic studies say, because they should give you the current status too. So,
Hi, my name's Larry Warner. I live at 412 Greenbrier Avenue, and I'm the retired head of risk management for Mars Incorporated. So Mars, just to let you know, would be like Snickers, M&M's, Pedigree. It's one of the largest corporations in the world. And during my job there, I was involved in a lot of traffic studies. And I have to say, the traffic study that I witnessed here was the most disingenuous traffic study I've seen in my entire career, either here or at my predecessor employer. They came on a Wednesday, just did one day on an early release date, which typically has less traffic. When we did traffic studies, we typically did them for anywhere for a week to an entire month, as opposed to doing one day. If you look at the traffic study map of what's ongoing in Osceola County, and I'll pass these around. This is actually from Osceola County. They're doing ongoing studies that I didn't count them, but somewhere between 50 and 100 locations. So they're doing extensive studies everywhere except where they're going to put a lot of, except for here where they're going to put a lot of traffic. Now, to your point about bringing 1,100 people here, if you look at the Osceola, Leonard gave me a map, I believe it was Leonard or Tom at one of these meetings a few weeks ago, about the classifications of roadways in and around the school. It is not designed for the kind of traffic that we have now, much less for the type of traffic you're going to bring in. Like I said, I've been involved in this for 25 to 30 years, and this is nuts. I've written a letter, I sent an email to both Disney and to Jay Wheeler and some people within the school board. I copied Tom on that, outlining the issues as they were and the issues as I saw if they added additional traffic. This community, to Pat's point, I cannot tell you how many people I've heard complain taking 30 minutes to get downtown. I cannot tell you how many times, because I walk my kids to school, I've seen fire trucks and ambulances not be able to transverse the campus street because there's so much traffic now. Shifting it around and dropping them off in different places is not an appropriate, in my opinion, is not a satisfactory result given the size of the roads in which you're bringing them in. If you were bringing them in 4-lane highways, and they actually have Celebration Avenue classified as a major thoroughfare, if you had multiple ones of those, yes, you could handle, 2,600 students. When you have something built in a small area, with small streets, not designed for that kind of traffic flow, you have safety problems and you have traffic flow problems. And so I'll pass this around. And actually, if you go on and look at the National Transportation and Safety, I went online and found something from the Research and Innovation Technology Administration. One of the points they said that accurate data count is critical. I would argue that one day on a Wednesday, early drop-off day, is not a sincere effort to do an accurate traffic study.
Thanks,
you.
Larry.
Thank you.
Ricky, thanks for coming.
Thank you, sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're a little more than halfway through the agenda, but not quite halfway through the time.
Question?
Yes.
Question? It's just a question, actually. During the holidays, I did take a walk around the area, and have we really looked at whether or not, I understand any parcel of land can be brought up to a certain standard that can be built on, but the difference between here and the school, I mean, I have some real doubts that we can do it, but it can be done, but that it'll cost a tremendous amount of money.
This wetland area here?
Yeah, this swamp back there.
Bringing up the wetland, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would just seem to me, and maybe, I don't know whether it's actually been investigated, what would be entailed in really bringing that up into usable land.
Can it be done? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should it be done? And I don't know.
Should it be done, and is it a reasonable amount of money? I mean, we're all talking about how much, but you're looking for a plan that saves money, but if you have to spend $4 or $5 million just to, I don't know, I don't think that's an unreasonable figure, seeing what we've thrown out on the Civic Corridor, just to make it flat, that it might be a $4 or $5 million-dollar bill, you know, to do what? Just to create a piece of land?
Yeah. No, your point's well taken. We have pointed do that work and pay for that work. Yes, sir.
You were gonna fill in?
Keith Thompson, 915 Postman. A quick question, I mean, and, you know, the numbers are critical. Personal opinion, the numbers should be front and center of every meeting because they drive the solution. But I've just got a question for, like, the school district is, if this hadn't come along and Disney hadn't effectively put this money in your lap, what was the contingency plan for West Side and for Reedy Creek and for the district where you do have overcrowding? Because that should play a part into the combination of ideas as well. That should be incorporated in. In effect, we don't have a problem. The problem exists elsewhere. So you must have had a plan to address that. What was that plan?
One of the things that we had mentioned, not the 21st meeting, but the last meeting that I was in attendance, that's why I asked about the combination question, and what I consider number 8 was the 851 building, and if the money was to be paid up front for all of the impact fees, then we could use it pretty much wherever we needed to accommodate the growth in this area. What we are doing is we're looking at the 851 building to see can it accommodate the student stations that we need for within Celebration Community, and can we build elsewhere, such as say Reedy Creek Elementary, and is there room there to build a wing? And we had already been looking at West Side. One of their current buildings has rather large spaces that are, in our opinion, being underutilized, and similar to what we've done at Celebration School Campus, and reconfigure, add some student stations, and just kind of make it more efficient. So we're not to a point yet where we've been able to find the prints for this building to determine can we chop it up, can we do something different to
The
accommodate.
blueprints?
Yes.
They're in my garage.
But I guess
We
the.
probably have access to them as well, we just haven't been able to look at them yet. And then the other one would be West Side, would be, with a reconfiguration. First of all, we know it's possible to do a reconfiguration, but will it yield the number of stations that we need?
I guess my
Keith's
question was
about
more
the
around the
money.
fact of, if Island Village hasn't happened, you would have had to solve that problem somehow. What was your plan to solve that problem? Because that then
That's what I'm
plays
saying.
into the solution here as
That's
well.
what I'm addressing, is that the West Side, you would have done a reconfiguration for whatever number of students we could have maximized at that campus. And then Reedy Creek, currently we're adding portable units to that facility, but we may have had to make the decision based on the growth in that area. If charter schools weren't coming on board to accommodate with some of that growth, we may have had to make the decision to add another wing out at Reedy Creek. Our concern was just making that particular school a little too large is our concern as far as student stations.
That's our concern about, yeah.
But
But leaving that aside, and I think that's good, but I think that's important when you guys have your workshop, that there has already been work done, because that's where the true problem exists. So if that's been done, then I'm sure that can get incorporated into this, and we'll come up with the win-win that everybody thinks is elusive, but I think should be pretty easy.
There's a possibility, I mean, it's out there. I mean, I think there's a combination of things that can be done, but I think it's important to note that helping the other communities within the district to relieve their overcrowding and their capacity concerns. And I believe there's a happy medium in here somewhere. It's just a matter of trying to figure out where can the money go, and because we only have so much
And be
to
most
spread out
productive,
there.
yeah.
And how can we, like you said, I appreciate that, how the most productive way to make it happen. When we talk about the CHIPS and how they felt with the K-5 concept, we're going to go back to, I got this much, and I can't build a K-5 school with what I would have available. So from a district perspective, I would have to put that, I'd have to pull my chips back in.
Right.
Okay, because I don't have the money to build an entire K-8 or K-5 facility out at the villages.
That's what I
Okay.
thought I had heard him say prior. What about the 851? Do you really think you can buy this building? And what is the fair market value and?
Can I add a little history on the?
We have a representative of the owner.
Yes.
By the way, I signed for the
Yes, you
homeowners
did.
association, actually bought this building for $2 million from the Celebration Company, which was actually probably a pretty good deal, so. I do not speak for the homeowner association on this, so we have not discussed this, but to tell you, that to me, when we look at options, and this is more my opinion, when we look at options, is we should try to figure out if we can add the existing stations on the existing campus that we have right now. That should be number one, because I think to get this building would be very, very difficult. First, we'd have to have a vote of the owners of the association in order to actually make that happen, and according to our charter right now. So, yeah, so it's a very high percentage, but also I think one of the issues is right now it's an office. It's being used, which means we would have to, if, let's just say we went to that route, which is, again, I'm not taking anything off the table, I just want to be realistic, is we'd have to build something else. So we'd have to take land that we may have somewhere else to build, so the Celebration Company would effectively be swapping this for that, and we'd be building an office building for our association, which is possible, by the way, if we want to go down that route. But I think, though, the cheapest and most appropriate thing would be figuring out how many we can add at this existing school, at the K through 8, and if it can handle the student stations that we need for the existing build-out and Celebration, then kind of figure out the other things. So I just want to throw out the 851 building. I would say we should discuss it. If we agree that, say, number 9 is probably the way to go, is figure out how to do it, and maybe we can't fit everybody here. Maybe we have to do something about the 851 building. But I'd just say that's a difficult thing, which would be very hard to promise.
Yeah. Any
It's
idea
also-
what
it's
that
also-
percentage is? Sorry, Vanessa.
That's okay.
Is it a supermajority?
I think it's a supermajority.
I think it's like
I mean, that'd be
2/3, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, and
Yeah.
I've looked at it too, and I think also the issue about, what, the cafeteria?
That's what I was gonna say. It's logistically getting them from here to where all of the infrastructure
And
and
I'm
would
just
be.
thinking safety, if you have to do an all-call for a reason and go on a lockdown.
Yeah, but if you had to, I mean, theoretically,
Yeah.
you could
You
put the
have to, you
fences,
have to,
you
but-
can make this part of the campus, you can move
So-
fences around, you can make it safe.
we've
If you
got a-
wanted to do it, but if we wanted to add more here, we probably could have an engineer look at it again and see what we can really do at the K through 8s. But I just want to let you know that it could happen, but it would be a difficult thing to count on.
It's on the board. It came up in
Yep.
brainstorming.
Yep.
I don't think it got its own
And the parking.
sheet, just because it's got so many.
And the school board can expropriate.
No, I don't think they can. We had a couple of hands up. Larry, I think you were first, and then Leonard.
It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's going to take a lot of buses to get people here because you want to move them a fairly long distance. Is that not correct?
There will be buses involved, yes.
Have there been any studies, the net present value of doing that in terms of busing kids for a long distance, in terms of cost of buses and cost of gasoline and cost to have the bus drivers?
Not actual studies done, but I can tell you that it will reduce the current travel time for the students who we're busing out to West Side and to Reedy Creek. They're on the bus for upwards of 45 minutes or plus. It will reduce their travel time significantly. So there are routes that are already in place that we would actually divert. So I would have to surmise that it would be actually a cost savings to the district.
Okay.
As far as, we may have to add some routes, but as far as fuel costs, I believe we would actually end up saving.
Okay, thank you.
Because right now they're going past Celebration to go to West Side, correct?
Leonard?
Actually, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong on this issue, though, also, it's a separate pot of money that pays for busing from the state also. So it doesn't come out of the county's operating budget for the schools or capital budget. They provide it's around $5,000 per year per student bus, I believe. And that's if they live within, greater than 2 miles away
Outside of
from
2 mile
a
radius, correct, yes.
a school.
And we do earn FTE for transportation.
Yeah, so it's an FTE for transportation. It's not a,
It's not
Yeah.
an Osceola County.
the ideal thing is you build a school where everyone has to only be bused 2 miles, you make a lot of money. But,
No, please.
Oh, sorry, Leonard, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had one other thing here, and I just got off track on his real quick. Oh, I actually brought up the 851 building in one of the one of the meetings as a possible solve, or possible even interim solving of the problem where, and I had mentioned leasing this building to the school district for a year or two, if need be, during the time something else was built, if our numbers were off, say by another 200 or something, and we don't have room in the high school, we needed to put 200 more here, or something, you know, to assist that way, this building could be leased to the county. Again, it would have to displace all the workers in it right now. But it could be leased to the county with only a vote of the CROA members, the way. No, only the CROA members. You're not losing the amenity, you're leasing it.
We won't be able to lose the amenity, you won't.
I actually
Because
spoke,
it's
Tom, let me interrupt you. I actually spoke to someone from the attorneys that cover the homeowners association here. And he said you could lease your buildings and you're not getting rid of the amenity if you would do that.
I think
that's disingenuous to the homeowners.
I think you'd have a hard time
because
with that, with the board on getting a vote to do that.
I didn't say it was, I was talking about legalities, I was not talking about possibilities.
Understood.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to hear from Tom, because it sounds like even though option one, which was the original plan, from when I was listening to you were describing it, having those resources used partly to upgrade the facilities here and part for outside of town actually might be a better solution.
Well,
Is that what you, I'd like to.
well, I'm not gonna say better. I'm still saying that I think option one is still a very viable option from a school district perspective. If we get a traffic study that tells us otherwise, then we obviously will, shy away from option one. But based on what the discussion was at one of the previous meetings, we did hear, what was being said, and can we look at other options to utilize those funds here and also elsewhere, and maybe accomplish it in a different way. The only reason we entertained 851 was because it was brought up here as, it was thrown on the table as a possibility, so
And I don't think that we should take it off of the table of possibilities. I just wanted to make sure that it was recognized that that it would have to go to, I think that it would be fair to say that we probably would not put it up to strictly the board voting. I would believe that we'd probably want it to go out to the public. Would you agree with that, Lee, based on just?
So do you, in your kind of, or Lee, maybe you have an opinion, or Tom, I mean, do you feel like that's something the owners would not, given the right offer, that it would not fly?
I think without having a place for them to hold, this is the community center. This is it.
Yeah, but so if.
I think it would be contentious, but I don't think it's a non-starter in any way.
Right, if the money was there to build something new on the Pacific Corridor, to take the place of Town Hall.
I
just
agree.
Back to the district.
Or at
I
one
agree
point in
that if we
time,
had a plan.
I would think even at one point in time, we talked about maybe even doing something over at Stetson, because there's a bunch of empty rooms over at Stetson. So, I mean,
this is not just offices. We're using this for jazz, we're using this for
absolutely.
singing,
For the
we're using this for, this is basically a community center. But I think that if we try to figure out what we can do at the K-8 school, and if you don't have enough student stations, then you have to look somewhere else, right?
So-
This would be the next natural place to go. But I would first figure out what you need, make sure we're on the same numbers. We agree with the same numbers, and see if you can build it there without taking over the fields. And then seeing how you can enhance it from there, so.
Pieces, we don't focus on 851,
Mhm.
but what I heard is that
A
now
blend.
is actually a real option that
Mhm.
could be looked into.
Well, I think it is, but the issue is that we don't know how big is too big before it starts to get to creating traffic problems and safety problems and.
I think even to Tom's point, I mean, you're concerned with building out, because you had mentioned your concern about getting too big over at West Side. When you were doing the numbers, about how many students were you talking about as far as your concern was getting to be too big? About what was the number of students that you were talking about for there?
Reedy Creek is what we were worried.
Oh, was it worried? Okay, what was the student population you were concerned
We would
about?
probably end up about 1,300.
Yeah, they're already 1,100 for a K-5.
And it's a
which is
K-5?
larger than our normal.
That wasn't,
Okay.
that wasn't the perspective I meant.
I thought it was-
know from an educational point of view, there's a question of
That's-
how
then
big
that's-
is too big?
right.
I'm thinking about safety and the streets and that this location is not meant to be a regional school. It's meant to be a neighborhood school.
Right, can I say something before I
But
sit
could-
down? That's
could
exactly
we-
right.
And that's why I'm asking for this workshop.
Yep.
And I'm kind of asking to be invited into your business a little bit, Todd, and Tom and Rhonda, can we sit down and work through a program and maybe a little bit of design to see what would 150 seats look like? What would 200 seats look like? Would we have to grab part of the 851 to get to 200? And just kind of move the parts and pieces around until it feels right, and see if that works. Otherwise, 9 doesn't work.
Right.
I noticed Stetson is
I
a,
did have a question. From what I heard, Disney's did not include filling in this land next door, correct? They were gonna.
That's correct.
Okay. So the money to fill in that land would be coming out of that $12.3 million.
Sorry, what I meant to say earlier was it's their permit, their allocation of wetland impacts.
But that $12.3 million would have to cover that as well.
Right.
So I'm not in that trade, you guys are. Could you feasibly do option 1 with $12.3 million? Have we looked at that? and
No,
said
we're
we could
adding our
actually
own
do it?
money to
Yeah,
that plan.
that's-
It's
the-
more like an $18 to $20 million plan when it's all said
So
and
what
done.
my question is, based upon what we've been hearing from the school board members that have been coming and staff that's been coming, is there is no money beyond the $12.3 million. That doesn't exist.
A little bit,
So
but not a lot.
option 1 is no more viable than
Well,
option.
I think it is because they would also be solving their problem, so they're willing to put money in towards it.
But they don't have any money, that's what.
Well,
They would if they were, right.
would.
If there was available, they'd match,
So
they'd
you
do
have
something.
$5 million to put into this?
That we have, but we
Because
can't build a
that's
school.
very different than what we heard.
But you
in the
can't
last
put-
meeting.
No, everybody was putting in.
We actually did hear that information at our meeting.
$3 to $5 million.
Because we would be doing infrastructure updates for the cafeteria and just so that we could
Okay, so we're
add
actually
space
at
for.
roughly 18 million we have available to us, which is a very
But
different number.
But only
than what
for
we
the,
heard.
but they only want to, you only want to put that in for roughly 1,000 seats. You will not put in $5 million to 300 seats on top of the
No.
$12 million.
that's the question.
Exactly, no.
Right.
K through 5, almost 5.
Oh,
Which
I
it
get you.
hasn't been.
I get you.
Yeah.
That's where I was gonna go to, so the K through 5, what do you price that? And why would that not be? Because you don't think
But
you
then
put
you start
any
dividing your
students.
community, and what we heard was you did not want to divide your K-5 community. You would rather have a K-5 and a 6-8, but you didn't want 2 K-5s, you didn't want 2 K-8s, because you didn't want us to divide your community, which is what we always thought you did not
Well,
want to do.
Rhonda, if you don't mind, I don't mean to rebut that, but in the last 6 meetings, we've been analyzing those things that we thought we all heard.
Okay.
And you did hear that, but it wouldn't necessarily be at the top of the list of the most important thing
Okay.
to us. Or you might have heard that from one person who felt very strongly about that, but there might be attributes of the other things that are much more important than that. So I don't want to divide the community either,
Okay.
but I'd rather do that than have option 1.
Okay.
Me.
So,
So can I say one thing? Number 9. One thing I didn't mention is that when the K-8 building was built, there is a space for an additional wing. It's always designed to have an additional wing off the middle school. Okay?
Between the middle school and the cafeteria, is that what you're talking about?
Correct. So, yeah, I know we're talking about 851 and everything else, but on the main campus, there was space for an additional wing. How many seats? I don't know. You know, in the student stations, I don't know. But there is room in that area. So, I think that's important to be mentioned because that falls into the original architecture of what was supposed to be built at the K-8. So, you know, I think it's something when we're trying to figure out costs, it's an option that definitely should be in there because it was in the original plan of possibilities.
It would be great to have a solution where we didn't throw $4 or $5 million away.
To fill.
For filling wetlands. We use that directly
I
towards
would maximize it
educational
all, I
purposes.
guess.
right, I think,
I don't know that that's real.
Or whatever that number
What,
is.
just theoretically,
Any money.
what number do you think you would need in order just to do the fill? Based on your experience?
We haven't done any kind of fill studies, but that's a lot.
It
So you're thinking 1 million, 2 million?
Probably 1
Okay.
So it all depends on how much, when you go out there and do the borings, how much muck you have to remove.
Is that a construction term?
It is.
Okay.
It's actually a technical term.
Yes.
There must be a way
Florida
to think
is.
through design on the existing campuses that can come up with a solution where we do not spend $1 to $2 million digging up and replacing muck.
Well, that's basically the idea of number 9.
I think if you do that in connection with the changes to building plans, then we get to the point, we need to look at the numbers that would be involved.
Exactly.
I wanted to just bring up, I had liked some of the aspects of thinking about the 851 for a different reason, which goes back to feedback that we kind of heard at the beginning of this process, and something that I've come back to a couple of times, which is that the current donation and operating agreement is between TCC and the school district. And our special purpose unit of government and the homeowners association is not represented anywhere. We have no standing, so we appreciate everyone being here, but you are under absolutely no obligation to even talk to us. And if anything were to happen to the homeowners association or CDD, they could potentially incorporate those entities into any future operating agreement. Which something I heard, and I've heard continually, is why don't we have more of a say? Why weren't we consulted? And the reason is because no one's obligated to do so, and we have no stick. You have no obligation to come here, which again, we appreciate you being here, but your obligation to us is strictly as taxpayers, and that's about it. So if there was an agreement that preserved a few $1 million that we don't have to invest in muck, and perhaps allowed us to replace the amenities lost in another part of town where we have land, or we could trade land, or find land, or rent, maybe there'd be an option also to incorporate some involvement for CROA and CDD.
Can we talk about Stetson for a second? How
Well,
is that?
Dan, we'll come back to that. That's an interesting question. Part of what I was thinking, and I like where you're going. I don't know that it's, well, let me put it this way. The most expedient, or our biggest and most urgent problem is the expiration of this agreement and the possibility that our kids might get bussed out. Not that anybody has any intent to do that, but that's really scary for a lot of people here. If we can, the most expedient thing to do is just extend the agreement that's in place, just change the dates, have people sign, and it's done. It's important, but I don't know if it's important enough.
So I agree with that, and I wouldn't do anything to derail that, but there's nothing saying that agreement in 6 to 12 months could not be renegotiated or extended or amended once we have a better contour. I think I'm overall.
Actually, it will be. It will be amended, because the agreement will have to be amended to bring in the specificity about the Island Village plan.
So, and that might be an opportunity to do it. I just feel like this, to me, throughout the whole process, I keep thinking back to the fact that we are trying to solve for something that could be I think as a minimum 3 years to 10 years down the line before some of these issues are going to come up. And I think, I'm always amazed that the original planners, yourself included, came so close to the mark. It's like building a plane while you're flying it. It's just, I mean, the fact that we're not already, that the projections that underlie Celebration were so close is great, it's amazing, but it seems to me a lot to ask that we're gonna do it again, especially where we have discrepancies with numbers. So I would love to find a way throughout this process. I mean, we can't solve every problem now, to put the right framework in place so that CROA and the homeowners have a larger say, or any say, even if it's consultative down the line. And if one way to do that is to also involve the 851 building or potentially CDD, I'd be really interested in exploring ways to do that.
I will let you know that that is not something that is typically, correct me if I'm wrong, there's not too many occurrences where the homeowners association actually is involved with the school district. I can think of maybe what, you've got Bella Lago is one, they weren't.
Homeowners Association, it's
No?
usually with their board.
Oh, it's with the board, okay.
It's their EFBD.
said that, okay.
So-
So there is no situation right now, correct?
One of the things you brought up was the educational facilities benefit district, and I had initially done some work, and I talked to the administrator, not the administrator, but a lawyer who was referred to me by the State Department of Education, who's involved with Flora Ridge, this gentleman named Chris Rowe, and one thing he pointed out to me is that the statute that devised those districts at the very end tacks on that the special purpose unit of government can do anything that an educational district could do. And that could also be an interesting way for us to bring at least CDD into any agreement.
Yeah.
I think you had talked about that at the time, didn't you? I thought, yeah, I think the Celebration Company had
So,
discussed that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that seems likely to happen is that whoever signs on, whoever is the ultimate developer, is going to come to CDD for a bond to build dirt, to unmuck.
Not for the school, for the.
No, but
the
for
infrastructure to get
the
that.
infrastructure, right. And then that money, those same dollars are probably gonna be turned around and paid as impact fees to the district, a good chunk of that same money.
It would have to be used for the purpose this fund is intended.
There'd be some restrictions, but presumably there's some, I didn't realize the CDD can take on the role of the education district.
Yeah, it's 1013, 355.
Yeah, I'm not sure which way the board would go. Actually, I'm one of.
But if
five
there
members.
was, let's say, and the parking garage, which seems like ridiculously expensive and was obviously a non-starter. But one thing that maybe not is parking lot that teachers could park in and that the residents could use. And that could be a joint operation between CDD and CROA and the school district, which would present an opportunity to bring all the parties into an agreement that might open us up for some additional, future involvement as more equal partners. That's all.
That's interesting. Rose, I cut you off earlier,
I'm
I'm
so
sorry.
sorry because you
No,
weren't done.
please.
I apologize.
I didn't mean to
for kind of-
monopolize your time.
I was trying to get that in there a few times, so. Is that an option? And we didn't really elaborate on the use of Stetson and what that would entail and.
I think there was a security issue. There's a security issue, and also, I think Stetson is downstairs, and it's multi-use, so the school district would have to take over the whole building.
Right.
But generally, the school district takes over the land around, so there's fencing, there's a couple things, and if they're going back and forth across Celebration Avenue.
I think, Tom, I think the context of Stetson, and I may be wrong, I think that was in this same conversation as we were talking about the 851 building. I think we were thinking shifting here to there.
Right.
Not necessarily the
Oh, I
kids.
see what you're saying.
I think I believe that was the context of how Stetson was working into it, because there's so much flux there.
Oh, both things came up, I think.
I don't remember that. But that's, it's been a while.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'd really, and a few of us would really like to explore this option 9 a little bit further. Is that something you'd be willing to do with us?
Absolutely. And we're already exploring it with the option of, the 851, building. And, but again, it's going to be, can we get enough student stations into this building? And would we have enough stations if we were to do the renovation or reconfiguration at West Side? And we already know that we can add some stations at Reedy Creek, so that part of it's not an issue.
Okay.
So then we just have to make the decision whether or not we want to up that school to, an additional 250, 300 student stations.
I think the point Tom mentioned needs to be explored as well. Is what about the predestined wing that they were talking
Right.
about?
Right.
Expansion of building 11.
Right. Yeah, how much can we add on the east side of the
Not
campus
just this building.
without spending money on a wetland impact, without taking out the baseball field, without creating a safety problem? How many seats can we come up with? And then, how much does that cost? And is that too big?
I mean, it was always in the plan, right?
Well, I think more than that, it's certainly smaller than 2,500 or 2,400 or however many, so.
And not just seats, obviously, but comparable facilities as well that enables those seats to function.
Right.
But if you do that, probably get a lot of phone calls about this. Because there's gonna be a lot of support for shifting the 8th grade to the high school. But if you did that, along with that, how many seats would be open up?
Right.
You give the opportunity of flexibility.
All right.
So before we move on, I want to get some, I want to lock this in. So we're talking about a workshop. We'll come to your office.
Fine,
Okay.
we'll work out a location.
Outside of this meeting. So voting members, I don't think we should overwhelm this team with all of us. I'd like to go.
I'd like to go too.
Would anybody feel strongly about participating? Anybody like to not? Anybody
I'll
not
go
want to?
anytime too.
So I'll get on the phone tomorrow and I'll find the right time with you and Todd. I think you have to be there, so we'll work around your schedule. But we should probably have 3 of us.
Tom, is it possible maybe to have Rose or somebody from the school also present at that? Since they kind of know what's going on with it?
Or an administrator.
Or an administrator, yeah.
Doesn't have to be me.
Well,
Yeah.
but I
It
would
would be
like.
great to have Mr. Bologna, because he really did say, you know, I really would love to see that we had this facility, or we have this provision for specials, and, you know, he'd have a real insight into what would help the school to function.
Yeah, and and going off of, Rebecca, what you were saying about the wish list, I guess. Mr. Balone did, you know, give us a wish list based on, I think, what was discussed through the SAC committee. And the majority of what's on that list is stuff that would be in a regular middle school. You know, the only thing I think that was a question mark would have been, I think he was asking for pre-K addition. You know, I'm not sure, pre-K is usually one of the last things that we'll add if we're having capacity concerns. And the only other thing was, I think, rubberized the track.
The track,
The
yeah.
track was already part of, you know, the consideration for the K-8 expansion. Rubberized was just something I don't know if that was a possibility or not, but, and then there was one other thing, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what it is, but the majority of what was on that list was all, sorry?
Middle school art?
Middle school art.
Yeah, art would be part of it, and
Art
we haven't discussed it yet, but next week, our middle school team will be here to discuss what, you know, what does a middle school look like, and, you know, what programs are offered, and what curriculum looks like, and that sort of thing. But art is part of a middle school curriculum, so that would be there.
Okay, so I want to get the blessing of the voting members on who should go to this workshop.
Can I nominate the 2 Toms and Rebecca? And
Yes,
somebody from the
Yes, you
school?
can. I'll second that, but Dan, do you feel strongly about going or not going?
I would love to go. Unfortunately, I'm going to be in the icy tundra of northern Maine for the next week. So I'm already
Fun
booked.
with
-5 when I get off the plane tomorrow.
Okay.
Jeff might.
Jeff, you okay? Still there, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right, Tom, and Rebecca. But I'll be in touch about the time, and we'll work out the right time and day. And Rose? Yes.
And just a reminder that will have to be noticed, because there's a majority of the.
There's no task force, you don't have to worry about the
US
task, just, you don't have to worry about for task force, though. And you need, well,
Yes.
oh, well, there's only 3 of them, so you're okay.
And they're,
There's 7.
oh, 7.
You're good.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
We can count.
Leah,
You can
what's
count
up?
better than me.
I wanted to raise 2 little points. One thing that's not been thrown up here in the consideration of ideas, and it was always a big bone of contention with me and the school board, is how they build, what they build. We're famous in Florida for building these multi-building schools, which to me is a huge waste of money when we're moving kids in and out of weather and parts. And instead of thinking of one big building to add to our existing campus, and you're talking about spreading grade levels from the existing kindergarten building toward the playground and the existing building 11 toward the cafeteria, do a little wing, add on to that existing buildings. So you're adding more to the K-1 and more to the middle school, which is what you need, rather than another big, huge thing that you're going to have to do all this sidewalking and everything else to. So just kind of throw that in the mix, 2 little smaller wing additions rather than another thing. But the other thing is, when it seems to get glossed over every time you talk about moving the 8th grade up to the high school, especially when they talk about sports, actually, you'd have a lot more sports opportunities that you would at the high school that was unavailable at the K-8 because we don't have the facilities. So that always seems to get like kind of lost in the, actually, they have a lot more to offer down there than we can possibly offer at the K-8. So I just wanted to throw that in there as a point, but just looking to adding on to our existing footprint rather than a whole nother chunk. And then you can either even have room to expand the teacher parking lot back there.
Tom or Rhonda, I think one thing I'm not really clear on is if you're gonna, and Tom, maybe you have an opinion on this. Looking at option 9 though, the major difference to me between option 1 and option 9 is that option 9 is not a regional facility.
Right.
So if this is an option and there's options to expand Covenant Edwin Celebration, I mean, it seems like losing the extra seats that you had originally planned for in option number 1. I mean, is there, the loss of those extra seats does not make it, doesn't
Because
take
they're
it
gonna
off
be
the table.
expanding at the other 2 schools.
Dan, the theory is that it wouldn't take the whole amount of the impact fee to build 200 or 300 seats here, and that all of the rest of the money, as long as we satisfy the seats that we need, and you can tell your developer that all of their kids can go to these schools, then the rest of the money, it's the kind of the county's business.
I think that's still the key point, is that the speed consensus on the numbers.
Right.
Your numbers.
Right. So we'll do that first.
So,
And 9 actually will add a third school to the mix because the current high school is almost at capacity. So we're having to take that in consideration to move the 8th grade to the high schools, roughly 150 seats today. So when we pick them up to move them, we all know we're out of high school seats. So no matter where we move the equivalent of your 8th grade students, that's the
Right.
additional expense on that high school to accept them through portables.
Well, and this is where we need your expertise to help us, because we're all assuming that this happens gradually over time, and that we just don't dump 150 more kids there, that this happens gradually. So there'll be graduations along the way, and that you can manage the number of non-celebration kids in there and over a 10-year period of time, we can make that work out.
Do you think with the building of the new high school, that's open in what, 18 months, something like that?
I mean, August of 2018.
August of 2018. That would probably, everything would probably shift then, correct?
We would see that relieving the east side of town and not the west side of town.
Okay.
Do you see basically no impact at all around here? I mean, that's pretty far, that's quite a distance.
It is, that's why I wasn't sure if everything would be
Right now,
shifting or not,
I don't see any
no?
relief coming out of Celebration High School by the opening of the new high
But
school.
Okay.
presumably, if a building project in whatever form it might take was started here in this school, we would be building 200 extra seats, which we are not sure that we actually need at this point. I mean, and in the meantime, those seats would have to be filled, wouldn't they? So, I mean, if we're building 200 extra seats,
That's not
in 2
necessarily-
years, we're taking 200 kids from somewhere else in the district until those
That's not
seats are
necessarily
filled.
No, it's not necessarily
Necessarily.
true.
Can I,
It-
can I
We'd have
ask?
empty seats.
You'd have to
Yeah,
redistrict
I mean,
is what
but
it then,
Yeah,
yeah.
we would redistrict.
Which would
our-
take 18 months, right?
Well, we usually do it a year in advance.
Okay.
If the students are steadily coming, we typically just let the seats sit empty because we don't want to move children out in just to move them back out.
Okay.
So depending on the build-out plan would determine if we might fill them through the out-of-zone process because those parents know those are a year to year. But I would see us filling 100, 150 seats through redistricting, knowing we were going to move them back out in 3 years.
Even if it was at the middle school level and they'd be zoned out at that point anyway?
We wouldn't do, it's a K-8, so
So you just
you have to
zone-
take all K-8. I can't just take K-5 or 6-8, whatever redistricting goes on, it has to be a K-8 environment.
so I'm interested to know what Mr. Booth thinks about.
I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn.
Well, I'm curious just to know about what your feelings were about.
I've got another private charter school company, apart from Jay's, that I know.
Good levity.
No, I want to applaud this whole group for getting together and doing this and talking about this. When the staff first came to me, I took what they said and started to move forward and talking to the right folks and finding out. You guys showed up at our workshop and said, hey, we don't like this solution. I said, hey, get together and come up with something.
I didn't know you were gonna have 20 meetings, but,
Neither did we.
looks like that's what it takes.
We didn't intend to.
So I think this is great. Like I said, I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn, you know. I have watched several of your meetings online, and I will say this, I do think Jay was right. Look, when we look at things, and I don't want to speak for Tom and Rhonda, but when we look at things for the Osceola County School District.
Yes.
And I want to make that very clear. I look at, this is Celebration, Osceola County, Florida. Just like I live in St. Cloud, Osceola County, Florida. And, you know, kids in Kenansville and Yeehaw Junction live in Osceola County, Florida too. So, and we are responsible for all those students in our public schools.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point when we talk about celebration schools, outside celebration schools. These are kids going to school, and we're trying to make sure that, you know, no matter where the kids are, that they actually have a good experience and a good education. So it's not just moving blocks around. I know we're trying to fit everything here and there. You know, and of course, if you're a child that had to fit everything, you might not like the way it's all fitting and walk-in class. So these are things that I think are very important overall from a holistic standpoint that we need to keep in mind.
And we thank you so much for taking time. I know.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, I apologize for being late. It takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to get here. So,
Sure.
But I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad to be here.
And you don't
And I
need
want
more
to thank Tom and Rhonda for being at all the meetings too, and they do a fabulous job for us, and I want to thank them for all their efforts and coming to all these meetings and working with you guys. I think that's what we're here to do, is to work with our community stakeholders and come up with the right solution.
Yeah, and Clyde Wells has been helpful also. That was one of the, you know.
Clyde's not a very helpful guy, but I'm glad.
He is actually.
We've got a great team over there, and I really do appreciate all the effort they put forth in this.
Well, everybody, everybody at the school district and the board members have been very helpful, and from the very beginning of this have just said nothing other than come up with a better idea, and we'll listen to it. So that's all we're trying to do.
Tom, if I,
Yes, sir.
I want to add up to what we had mentioned about the small wings. And we've already explored that as a possibility. Our concern with adding on wings is there's already somewhat limited play space. You're going to take that play space and consume it with a building, and where will we, send the kids out to play? Because if we're saying we're not going to mitigate the wetland area, then over here is basically where you got to go. So I guess recess is going to entail walking the plank over here and then going back.
Again, it's what.
Well,
what is
does
the
middle school
least
do
worst
recess?
alternative?
They do it right between lunch, don't they?
No,
Again, it's trying to come up with the least worst alternative.
Absolutely, and
They just hang
I just
out.
wanted to, you understand that we have looked at the possibility of, kicking out a little bit from one of the existing buildings and also that space, I think, in front of, by the cafeteria. There's that play area right in there
Yeah.
as a possibility to add a wing, and although a wing could potentially be there, again, it's play space, and it's also gonna be a very difficult location to construct a building, unless you can build one and helicopter it and drop it, because it's just gonna be real.
Brian can do it.
Yeah, it's gonna be real difficult.
All in 3 months before.
Well, but that is the middle school space, correct?
That is
That is
technically
not,
space.
the middle schools don't have a play space. The play area
They
is
don't.
on the other side, because they don't have time to technically.
Tom,
There's no-
excuse me, we do use that area at lunch. There is a time for the students to go, and they do run, middle school boys especially.
And you can tell just by looking at it, it's well used.
Yes,
It's well used.
it's hard to keep the grass on there, so I just
where
needed
is
to
that?
interject.
Right between the middle school and the cafeteria.
Okay.
That-
It's like
there's
the
that open
strip-
space,
it's
right,
like
you know where
yeah.
the Tree of Life is?
Yeah.
Right through there.
It's actually a big drainage area is what it is.
And in
It is
fact,
drainage.
they're working on it now, and so,
Disney.
we're not able to use it.
I'm not
and
even
then
sure we
it's-
can feasibly put a building there unless we
So-
reconfigure the drainage. And one more quick thing was the parking has come up several times tonight. Part of that, there is some single parking available with that, so it's not a parking garage, but there would be a lot there that would be in addition to what's already there.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
And you may have already discussed this, because I did
watched the end of the meeting on the 21st, and you kind of got to, I think, 4 or 5 of these. You were doing chips or
Yeah.
points or
That's
something.
right. Yeah.
So which ones are still
Yeah,
in?
I can go over that again.
Just quick, just really
Sure,
quick.
sure, no problem. We did this right before you came in. but
Okay,
Happy
I'm
to do
sorry.
it again. So, I apologize, it wasn't a game, and we weren't.
No, I
But
understand.
we were kind of making it up as we went. So we just decided, and we weren't all here, by the way. So there were only 5 of the 7 voting members here.
Well, but
Just
Pat
wanted to
just
get-
said she was putting all of her chips on number 9.
Yeah, I just
Brian,
wanted to
did you
get
ever
a feel
say?
for, we've been at this for
Oh,
5
what did-
meetings, where are we
Sure.
with 9 ideas? So we each gave ourselves 3 chips, times 5 of us. Number 1, the original plan got 1. Number 2, which is redistribute the grades, got 2. Number 3 was build a new middle school someplace, got 2. Number 4, build a charter school, got 0. Number 5, build a parochial school or some other kind of private school as a bit of a Band-Aid, got 1. Number 6, build a K through 8 in Island Village, got 0. Number 7, build a K-5 in Island Village, got 3. That unlabeled combination, those are ideas that really get applied across the board to the other things in combination. Number 9 is a leading contender. The backup so far is number 7, a K-5 in Island Village.
And Tom, Mr. Combs, what's the problem with number 7?
Would be funding. We wouldn't have enough funds to build a K-5. And, well, and also
Okay.
divide the community, which we
Thank you.
addressed is somewhat okay, but
Yeah.
it's still.
Well, you'd have to bus some of the kids that were over here, you'd have to bus them past the current K-8 to get them to the new one.
So the 2 members who weren't here last time plowed their chips into number 9
And
also.
number 1.
And number 1,
And
sorry.
number 1.
Yep, and Brian. So, again, it's an informal vote, but I think it's pretty clear we're looking for a creative solution that just builds the number of seats that we need here, preserve as much money as we can from the impact fee to help the county elsewhere.
Put it where they need to for the other kids.
So a couple of housekeeping things before we run out of time. It's about 7:45 right now. The traffic study, we talked a little bit about, but that won't be ready for 2 weeks from now.
Within 7 to 10 days.
Okay, so that's not going to necessarily help us for our workshop or the next meeting.
We're really
But-
hoping for next Monday, but
Okay. Now, that's the one you were doing.
Todd was,
Or,
We're doing some additional studies.
okay,
That will be ready.
okay. February?
Yeah, our traffic counts are-
Okay.
Can I just ask a question about that? Because we had some concerned residents today talk about that. Are you happy with the terms in which it's been taken so far? Are you satisfied with that? Do you imagine that the company that you're using is reliable? Because you presumably you've used them
Very-
before.
it's Osceola Engineering, so they're very reliable, so
They
So
were the
those
ori- they're the
concerns
ones
that
were
you've
the
heard
original
today
for
don't.
the-
I believe they were the original. Clyde's not here to verify that, but
I really got a question, validity. I said this before, and I'll say it again, I really question the validity of that study, haven't had so much experience at doing these. Disney, the person at Disney, I was out there when he was there, and he said they plan to come back more than once to get a better representation. I've complained numerous times to the officers around, the sheriffs around, about the problem with the current level of traffic in and around the school. And again, I'll state again that I don't think your study is valid. I really question the validity of it based on what it was, the time it was taken, and the short period of time which you observed, which was, again, on a Wednesday when a lot of people have alternative ways of coming to school. So you pick the lightest day to do the test. And I really question the validity of it.
so I haven't seen it yet, so I
Yeah.
don't know how many days they've been in there.
They were there, because what they did is they set up some ways of doing traffic counts They put it up in the morning, and it was gone at the end of the day.
But until
Okay.
I see the report, I won't know if they're just
Well, I-
using the one day or if they're gonna tell us they were at multiple days, so
Mhm.
I can't even begin to question the validity
All
of
right.
it until I see the report and see what they've listed as substantial, how they base their
What-
data, I mean.
What is the process for us challenging the validity of that report?
I guess you would have to.
Yeah, my God, I think it would have to go to the school board.
Yeah, I would, sorry, Ricky.
I don't know.
would guess they would
Larry,
have to come to the
I
school board
won't
and tell
speak
you
for
they don't.
anybody else.
Okay.
But for myself, I'm not gonna put a lot of weight on whatever the traffic study says. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
It's
me.
just silly. I've been involved with traffic deaths around a facility, and I've seen too many kids almost get hit even with traffic people out directing traffic. I know there was a kid hit on a bike recently on his way to school in town already as it is. I mean, this is a serious problem as it is now without bringing 1,100 more, or is it 1,100 more kids into the, how many more are they bringing?
No more than 1,000, I think,
Oh, well,
I think
okay.
750 is what you were talking
Keep in
about,
mind,
right?
The school is 1,000, and then the state says you take 10% off the utilization, that's
N-
900.
But you're still bringing 900. I mean, you're talking.
We don't fill a school to capacity because we've already talked about.
I understand that, but
so-
I really question that argument. 900, 1,000, 1,100 is not going to make much difference when you're already overloaded with what you have. I mean, the best way to get to school now, if you're running late, is to cut through all these neighborhoods just to get there. And we live on, right on Greenbrier. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen kids almost get hit on Greenbrier because people speeding to get their kids to school, or because there's so much traffic in and all the way to crossing the street.
How long does it take to pick up a child at Celebration K? No, say it. How long?
It could, parents that are bringing cars usually get there from 30 minutes early to right before time, and they'll park immediately by the school and a block away, and then walk in, and then for everybody to clear, the kids to clear the campus is like 15 minutes. But then the Outer Banks, these
If
stop
you get there
signs
at
will be an hour.
dismissal, how long does it take?
If you get
You
that
can't-
dismissal,
you
you
can't
can't
get there.
you can't get to your kid for 15 minutes.
It's like any school.
I was gonna say, it takes me 45 minutes to pick up my kids at Harmony Community School. This is not a Celebration problem. This is just a problem at schools.
Well, no, let
Hey, Larry.
me question that, please, if I may.
Sure.
That's poor design. It's poor design. If you're putting your schools in residential neighborhoods without the streets that are
Some of those
developed,
schools have been there 40 years.
well, that's the problem. You don't go expanding you shouldn't go expanding schools in places like that. You should find places where you can.
If we had the money to buy more land and build
So,
more
hey, Larry,
standalone schools, we'd certainly do.
Let's stand down.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Stand down from this.
Okay.
I mean, the whole point of us being here
Right.
is not to pile on, number one, it's to come up with a better idea.
And that's my point. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm trying to come up with a better solution.
Yes, please.
And I don't know what the answer is. I haven't been in all these committee meetings. I wasn't aware they were going on. But I did, when this first came up, I did write an email to school board members as well, questioning the issue up front.
So the whole problem, if I can just summarize, is this location was never meant to be a regional school. We've got neighborhood streets, neighborhood issues. This site cannot handle 2,000 students, it just can't. So regardless of what the traffic study says, the best way for us to defeat the original plan is come up with a better plan.
And I agree.
So let's focus on that, not criticize the original plan, pile on those who created it. That's a losing strategy, so, yes, ma'am. Oh, hey, Dory. How are you?
Well, I think I'm at all the meetings and listening and trying to understand, and thank you for all your time. It still seems like we're still at the point where there's 1,000 sets of little footsteps coming this direction, and we have to try to figure out what to do with those 1,000 little footsteps. With Jeff's study, which I went over a couple times last week, I thought was really great because I think it helped us understand that the Celebration students, whether they lived in the Island Village or whatever, pretty much we're going to be able to take capacity. We'll be able to fill the seats and provide the seats. And we have 10 years to do it. So that gives us a little bit of a leeway. The two options that were brought by Tom, Mr. Phelps, and Mr. Wheeler were still, I think, are still very much in the mix. And I understand the traffic studies, and people really don't want that, okay? Now, with what Jeff told us, to me, solves a big problem, and that is dividing the community. As Tom Sonnenberg says, we don't want to divide the community with two separate schools. I don't think that we have the funding through the county to build schools in Island Village if the land is provided. If the land is provided, they still don't have the funding to build a public school. However, now, keep in mind, if all the Celebration students that live here can come to this K-8 and that high school, then if I was moving into Island Village and there was a Renaissance charter school, for example, or another one there that was a K-8 school, that's an optional school. If the land is provided and the funds come from the charter school to build the charter school, if I lived in Island Village and said, I want my children to go ahead and go down the school, because my two children came, and nieces and nephews, there were 7 of them, in the 5th and 7th, they pretty went to a church-type charter school because it's the same type of teaching and instruction. I think it's very similar. They did very, very well and graduated from the high school, Celebration High School. So, but if I was living in Island Village, I would like my children maybe to go right down the street. Maybe somebody in North Village, knowing it's a technical school, would say, well, that's where I'd like my children to go. So after 5 or 6 or 7 years, we may not really have to expand the K-8 school because still children could go to the charter school by choice, from what I understand. Now, the only thing that, from what I understand also, is that funds from the state go to the county to build schools and provide expansion, but if children go to the charter school, they don't necessarily go to the county, and so that's not always very, maybe the direction that the county wants to go, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, I think they wouldn't compete necessarily but yet it would be an option for children in this community or in Island Village, and then the developers who are developing in Island Village would be able to say, we have a wonderful K-8 technology charter school. And it's not something that's been brought up, but I just thought it would help, it would solve possibly the K-8 build out over the 10-year period of time, and we wouldn't have to do anything, we just go along. And Rose really convinced me, and Rebecca too, that to not only to put the traffic on the streets and create that problem, but she totally changed my mind as far as expanding. We have a well-oiled machine right here, and I think compounding it with all these other issues is probably not to keep it the well-oiled machine. I think it would cause problems. I think to do a K-5 school and then bring all those middle schoolers here, so you have two schools being funneling into here is not also necessarily a good idea. But doing a K-8 school over time, I think it could be filled. Or the other thing would be to take the funds and go to West Side and build perhaps a charter school. And the only other thing is I did do a lot of studying on the charter schools because I wasn't really necessarily sold, but it is trending. In 2005, I think in Florida there were 92,000 students that went to charter schools. In 2015, it's 290,000 that are going to. So it is trending, and the reason I think it's trending is because of the influx that's coming into the state. These children have to be educated, and our number one goal is to make sure we give them the best education they can get to go out and build a future for themselves and the rest of us that live here.
Thanks, Dory.
Thank you.
Leonard, could you hold on just a minute? I'll come back to you, I promise. We've only got 4 minutes. I want to get some housekeeping done, and then we'll go around for final comments. Our next meeting is January 11th, 6 o'clock. a few of us cannot be here, and I'm very likely going to be late. I've got a flight coming in that doesn't land until after the meeting starts. I'll get here as fast as I can, but you shouldn't wait for me. So I need a motion for somebody to chair.
Is it Tom?
I won't be here.
You won't be here?
I won't be here. I responded in the email. I'd gladly do it, but I will not be here at all.
All right, well, that took care of that.
So we will
So-
probably have a quorum problem, because I do not know if I'll be here next week also. So we are dangerously.
Rebecca, we can have, what do we want to do?
Well, wait a minute.
Should we just have a coffee?
Jeff, will you be here?
Jeff, are you gonna be here on Monday?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay.
How about Jeff?
Brian?
I should be here, I'm in Tampa, but I should be.
Okay, we're gonna have we'll have a
I'm
quorum.
happy to chair the meeting if we have a quorum, but I'll be sure it's four for sure.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
4.
so you have 4. We're good. You have a quorum.
Okay,
How
so,
about Jeff, does he want to chair it?
He just said he could chair it. He just said he could chair.
I motion that Jeff chairs the next meeting.
is there a second?
Second?
All in favor for Jeff?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Yeah, I'm not there, so I couldn't see you all step back.
Jeff, you've been drafted.
We also need somebody to take minutes.
Yeah,
I can do that for to start. Yeah, I can do that.
excellent.
Okay, perfect.
And you
Excellent,
can send
thank
me the
you.
stuff and I can post it.
Thank you both. And Jeff, you and I connect before the end of the week. Just, I can give you these notes and a few thoughts. Thank you for doing that. Okay, our next upcoming meetings, the 11th at 6 o'clock here, the 25th at 6 o'clock here, February 8th at 6 o'clock here, and a town hall to be determined. We needed to get a few more on the schedule so that the school district can post these, so you guys aren't in sunshine law violation in case 2 of you show up at the same time. It happened last time.
I'll let the attorneys.
But I hope that after a workshop, after a couple more meetings, both traffic studies come in, the February school board meeting and the extension of the agreement, hopefully, it's not going to take much longer than early February. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any more public comments? Leonard, you're up?
No, I'll leave mine for another day.
Okay. Anybody else? Todd? Brian? Rhonda? Tom? Bill? Tom? Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
January 14th, we will have our superintendent community reception of Valencia, seeing how all you are involved in what goes on here in celebration. If you want to come meet our 3 finalists and give some input on our next superintendent, it's January 14th. I believe it's 6 to 8 or something like that. It's posted online.
All right, thank you.
We,
I was looking forward to it.
Yes, ma'am.
since I missed the meeting on the 14th, I was ill, and then we weren't here on the 21st. So you want to put the K-5 in the village and turn the current campus into the middle school?
No, that was an addition.
No, it's an additional K-5.
Oh, it's
So-
an additional K-5.
So K-5 and the K-8
So you want to make this a K-8 and that a K-5, so you would also have to allow for their 6-8 to come.
To
the
come in
school.
here,
So
yep.
That's what we need to look at.
Yep.
Yep. Ness, anything else?
No, just thank you for the school district's continued coming here. We really appreciate it. I know it's in the evening and out of your realm, so thank you very much.
Okay. Rose, anything else?
No, thank you.
Jeff, anything else?
So, no, I'm good.
Okay, 8 o'clock, right on the nose. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
We're
you.
adjourned.
Thank you. All right, Tom, do it again.
On budget, on schedule.
Yes, very good.
How are you, sir?
You were trained well.
Oh, I know that.
No.
Actually, this is different. This is a homemade smoothie. I do have the isogenics too.
I thought it was the isogenic berry.
Actually, this has, this has just the protein in it, and then I've got mixed berries in it too. So, it's my dinner.
Hundreds of years.
Right, but yeah, somebody needs to be there.
small piece, but it is interesting that they saw we needed a separate building.
I even think, I mean, I would think that either you or because someone is so involved in the elementary.
Celebration kids.
I could see something I wanted to let you guys. Happy New Year, son. How are you? Very well.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry?
You have to tell me what that was. You actually have to go to his ordinance science and stuff. Start to use dance around where there's now we have just to use you actually back there. This wasn't yeah, no, it's the regular public school.
When I was promoted.
Yeah.
One less like you yourself. You don't have to spend much more.
So maybe it's based on the plan.
And they are very good.
Phase 1, phase 2 is that. So they want to decide